Okay, good morning, everybody. Доброго ранку. Вітаю, може, треба так сказати. Um, First of all, I just want to sincerely, від щирого серця, привітати вас усіх з поверненням міста Херсона. I can't even imagine the feelings that you must be having right now. For me, it was a very special day. I have many friends who are from the city of Kherson, and to see their reactions telling me how they felt, it was something very, very special. So, of course, it's only the start. There are many other things that need to be done, but it's a very wonderful thing what's happening, and I'm sure it will continue into the future. So, we're going to start. We've got quite a lot of different topics that we're going to be looking at today. And first of all, we are going to be beginning with question forms. Now, question forms are a bit different in English compared to what they are like in Ukrainian. And we have a lot of little nuances, little areas that we need to consider when we are looking at these question forms. So, let's start first of all by looking at the types of questions that we have in English. Now, there are two, there are two main types of questions in English. We have what we call closed questions and open questions. And first of all, we will consider the idea of a closed question. Now, if a question is closed, this means that we can answer this only with yes or no. So, for example, we can say a normal sentence, he is Ukrainian. If we make this into a question, is he Ukrainian? And we can answer this with yes, he is, or no, he isn't. Closed questions have to start in a very specific way. They can begin either with some form of the verb be, like we have here, is he Ukrainian, with an auxiliary verb це допоміжне дієслово в українській мові, or a modal auxiliary verb. And these are the only ways that we can start. So we have, for example, be, is he Ukrainian? Якщо ми вживаємо допоміжне дієслово, то у нас, наприклад, for example, do you live in Kyiv? And modal auxiliary, will you be away for a long time? Will you be away for a long time? So these are all closed questions, and these are the way that we start with be, with an auxiliary verb, or with a modal auxiliary verb. And we can answer these questions with yes or no. The second type that we have are called open questions. And open questions start with a question word. So these are words like who, what, where, when, why, and so on. So, for example, we can say, what time did he arrive, for example. And when we have these question words, we cannot answer yes or no. We need to give a fuller answer. And so this is why they are called open questions, because we have to give more information. We cannot just say yes or no in this situation. When we think about the simple tenses, with the simple tenses in closed questions, we usually begin with an auxiliary verb, and this is often do, does, or did when we have the simple tenses. So, for example, if we have present simple, where do you live? If we have past simple, as an example, what did he do for a living? So we can use, or if we have does as well, let me just add that in. Why does he like football? So in the simple tenses, we use do, does, and did to add for these as auxiliaries. And as you can see, these auxiliary verbs, these dopomyślne diaslovo, they go before the subject. So where do you live? Why does he like football? What did he do for a living? So the auxiliary verb goes before the subject when we make this kind of questions. Now, in conversation, when we speak in the normal, everyday English, not the сучасний англійській мові. Movelius, hello, дуже радий, що ви з нами сьогодні. When we have our normal spoken English, what we often do is we often have a normal positive sentence, but we can use this as a question. And it all depends on the way that we say these sentences. So for example, we can say something like, you've sent the tickets. Normal intonation, this is just a normal sentence. But we can change our voice and we can say, you've sent the tickets? And we can make this into a question. We make our voice go up, and this makes it into a question. Now, we use this when we want to check information, or if we want to show surprise at something. So if we say, you've sent the tickets, we want to check that you did this before, or you told us this and we are surprised that you've sent the tickets. So we can use the intonation to go up at normal sentences to make these kinds of questions. Now, when we make questions in English, there is often a lot of confusion, trudności, problems, when we use the word which and when we use the word what in questions. And the difference is this. If we have a limited choice, then normally we use which. So for example, I can say, which cake would you like to try first? We have a choice of cakes, and I want to know which one you would like to have. It is a limited choice. If it is an unlimited choice, then this is when we should use what in questions. So for example, I can say, what cake do you like best? Here it's not limited, it's any cake in the world you can choose. So we use what in this situation, which is for the limited choices. Now, another problem or another difficulty that can happen in creating questions is the use of prepositions in question. Preposition це прийменник українською, and the position of the preposition in the sentence is very important in the English language. So, the way that it works for us, in normal, everyday questions, we put the preposition at the end of the question. So, for example, who did you buy the book for? So put it in capitals just to highlight it. So the preposition usually goes at the end of the question. Another example, actually that's a bad example. Which job did you apply for? Again, preposition, end of the question. Now, it is possible to say, for whom did you buy the book? Grammatically, it's possible. It's okay. But this is very, very formal, це дуже офіціально, і тому, як зазвичай, ми так не кажемо. Це трохи старомодно, також я можу сказати. And this is a very typical problem for Ukrainian speakers because, for example, if we have a question like, who are you playing with? In Ukrainian, we would say, z kim ty граєш. So, z at the start of the sentence. And so very often Ukrainian speakers would say, with whom are you playing? Which, again, grammatically, it's okay. It's a pomylka. But it sounds very, very old-fashioned. It sounds very unusual. So, as a general guide, if you have a preposition, so for, with, at, on, in, и так далее, we put them at the end of the question and not at the start because it sounds very formal, very official, and it's just not how we usually speak. A couple more things I would like to add about questions before we move to our next topic. And we're going to have a look now at two other types of questions that we have, which are subject questions and object questions. Now, these are very important because the way that we construct, build our sentences depends on if we have a subject question or an object question. So, first of all, what actually is a subject question? A subject question is a question where the answer is the subject. So, for example, ми можемо запитати, наприклад, who won the match? And answer, Volyn Lutsk, our commander, won the match. So here, u nas jest zapytanie who, in capitals, and the answer is Volyn. Volyn is the subject of the sentence. Now, when the question matches to the subject, we do not use do, does, did, и так далее. We don't use these dopomyślne слово to make the question. We just use a normal, regular, past simple, present simple, whatever it might be. So that's how we do it. We just use the normal, regular, past simple to make the question. The alternative is an object question, and this is when the answer is the object of the sentence. So, for example, we can say, where did you live? And the answer, I lived in... let's change it to Kherson. Why not? So, I lived in Kherson. So, here, the answer of the sentence is not the subject. The answer is the object of the sentence. And so now we need to use do, did, does, и так далее. So it's very important when you create a question that you think, okay, is the answer to the question the subject or the object? And then that will tell you if we need to use did, do, does, or if we use the normal positive sentence order as we have here. And one other thing I want to add about making questions is we have special ways of showing emotion when we create a question in English. There's a couple of ways we can do this. One very typical way that we can do this is to add the suffix ever to the question word. So, for example, we can say, what did you do? Proste zwyczajne zapytanie. But we can also say, whatever did you do? I jakщо ми кажемо, whatever did you do, this can be annoyance, you can be annoyed, or it can be surprise to something. And you can do this with almost all question words, whatever, whoever, however, and so on. And the only one that you cannot do this with is with whose. We cannot say whose ever, because reasons, it's quite complicated. But however, whoever, whenever, why ever, whatever, we can add this ever to show that we are surprised or annoyed when we ask this question to the person who we're talking to. Another typical way that we can show surprise or annoyance is by adding a phrase. We just use what did you do, by adding a phrase in here, in this space between the question word and the verb. Now, what can we use here? Now, if you are being polite or standard English, możemy tak сказати, we can say, what on earth did you do? What the heck did you do? We can also say, what the hell did you do? Is also fine. There is another alternative that I am sure all of you are thinking of, which is this word. I can't say it because this will be on YouTube later and I don't want to get demonetized for the swearing. But this word beginning with F is also possible. Of course, no, so it's very aggressive, ale ludzie tak кажуть, тому можемо так сказати, what the did you do? Це теж може бути варіант. Okay, so that's everything I want to say about question forms. So we're now going to move on to the past perfect, which was another question that I was asked on Twitter. So, a je velika raznica między what did you do i what have you done? Tak, je velika raznica. So, what did you do? This is past simple. This is the past simple verb form. And we would use this to show when we talk about, we need to have some kind of time reference. So this means we need to know what time this happened. So for example, you could say, I got lost in the forest yesterday, and then reply, what did you do? So here we are talking about yesterday, саме про вчора, тому треба вживати past simple. What have you done? Це present perfect. Я думаю, що ми всі розуміємо. Це present perfect. And we use the present perfect when we have some connection to the present. So for example, let's say you, I don't know, you come home and there is a broken bottle on the floor. You can say to your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, we can say, what have you done? Because now we have a present result. And so we should use the present perfect in this situation. Now, the difference between past simple and present perfect can be quite difficult because, of course, in the Ukrainian language, you do not have this difference. But in general, if we have a connection to the present, we want to connect the past and present together, then we should use the present perfect. If it's all about the past and there is no connection to the present, then we use past simple. So the basic idea is the same in the sense of that we are asking about something that happened previously. But if we know when, we use past simple. And if we don't know when, or there is a connection to the present, then we use present perfect in this situation. No, tak є така різниця. Я розумію, що це, може, тонка, але ми так кажемо. То, наприклад, якщо ми кажемо I got lost in the forest yesterday, what have you done? Це буде помилкою. Тому нам треба так сказати. Okay, so let's move on to past perfect. So The past perfect, again, can be very difficult for Ukrainian speakers because in standard Ukrainian, of course, you do not have this aspect, this form. So first of all, let's just look how we make it. We make the past perfect using had plus the past participle of the verb. Past participle is the tretja forma, if you know this system. But the correct name for this is the past participle. For example, we can say something like, I realized that I had forgotten my keys. So here we have this had forgotten as the past perfect. Now, we use the past perfect to show that an action was completed before another past action. So if we use the same example again, I realized that I had forgotten my keys. The first action, you forgot your keys, це перша дія. І друга, я не можу друга, you realized. So here, forgot your keys happened first, and so we must use the past perfect in this situation to show which action happened first. And this is one of the most important things to remember about the past perfect, is that we only use it when we need to, when it is necessary to show which action happened first, or it's not clear which action happened first. If we just have two actions in sort of first action, second action, so for example, I arrived in Kyiv and went to my hotel, here we have first, перша дія, you arrived in Kyiv, і другий, went to my hotel. So here it's the correct order, so we can just use past simple, past simple. But if we have this different order, then we must use past perfect to show which action happened first. And it's one of those things where when people use past perfect, they often use it too much. Like Ukrainians often try and use past perfect way more than we would do like in normal everyday English. So it's important to remember that we only use these verb forms, this past perfect form, if we want to show the difference between these, which one happened first, which one happened second. And it's also important to remember as well that we can also use this with times. It doesn't have to be an exact action, but it can be with a time. And a very typical construction is using by plus a time and then past perfect. So for example, we can say by 2020, he had lived in Lviv for 3 years. So this is also a very typical construction because here we don't have a past action, but we have a past time. Sorry, I just need to ban someone. Okay, done. So we use this before a past action. And this is the most important thing to remember. We have to have some kind of past time or past action for it to be referred to. And this is how we use it. Okay, so that's basically it for past perfect. Past perfect is quite simple in that respect. We just need to remember that we use had plus past participle, and that we have to make sure that it goes before some kind of other past action. So now we move on to articles. And articles are probably one of the most difficult areas of language for Ukrainian speakers because, again, in Ukrainian, you do not use articles. Articles are very challenging because the rules don't always work. There are many, many exceptions. But we're going to have a look at some of the general rules for how we use articles. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the time to explain everything because articles, I could do a 8-hour stream on articles. But we're just going to focus on the main uses of articles and how and when they should be used. So first of all, we need to look at when. A w ukraińskim je dokonana forma dieslova, te same що perfect czasy. Не same, because sometimes in Ukrainian you use dokonany vid, and it's not always the same as perfect. So like you have obviously dokonany, nedokonany vid, but for example, я написав. Це може бути I wrote, це може бути I had written. Все залежить від контексту. And same with nedokonany vid. That can be past continuous, past perfect continuous. It really all depends on the situation which you're referring to. But it's not always. When you make these forms in Ukrainian, you don't always have an exact form as we do. Like again, я написав, я пішов, я зробив. Це може бути або past simple, або past perfect. Це залежить від контексту. Тобто я зробив домашку, наприклад. Це може бути I did my homework, або це може бути I had done my homework if we have some other ones. Це не дурні запитання. Doesn't work like that. There are no stupid questions. It's important. I want everyone to understand. This is why I'm here. So, такі, дурних запитань не існує у нас. We need to make sure everyone understands how it works. That's the important thing. Okay, so let's go to articles. So, first of all, we need to consider what exactly do we use for articles and when we should use them. As I'm sure you know, there are four main types of articles. We have a and am, we have the, and we have no article. Now, when do we use these? First of all, a and an is almost always used with singular countable nouns. So this means that we can count them, and there is only one of them. So, for example, we can say, I bought a computer yesterday. Computer is singular, there's one, we can count computers, so we should use a. The can be used with any common noun. So this means plural, singular, countable, uncountable. We can use that with pretty much anything. So for example, we can say the computer which I bought yesterday, so no comma there, doesn't work. We will look at the difference, like in what situations we use them. We will look at these in just a moment. But we can use that with any type of common noun. And no article we can only use with plural or uncountable nouns. So for example, something like, I like computers. Now we have computers, umnožení, тому можемо вживати без артиклу. So these are the principal types of articles that we have in English. And so now we need to look at when do we use these articles? How do we use them? So if we begin with a and an, at lower levels, like when you're at school, for example, you often learn that we use a and an the first time that we talk about something. The first time we mention something, we use a or an. This is kind of true, but not 100%. What is better is to think about this as new information. Is what I am saying new information to the person who I'm talking to? So for example, if we say like, I have a cat. If we use the article a in this situation, this means that I think you do not know about this cat. Ви не знаєте, що в мене є котик. So in this situation, we should use the article a. Just to give you an example of something where we do not use the article a, but it is the first time we talk about something. I can give you the example of something like, please open the window. Let's imagine we are in a classroom and I say to Sasha, Masha, Pasha, Dasha, please open the window. It's the first time, so перший раз, але тут ми вживаємо the. And the reason why is because we use the when we have what we call shared information. So I think you know which window I am talking about. And again, this is often taught as the second time, третій раз, четвертий раз, і так далі, we use the, and this is not always true. If you think the other person knows which thing you are talking about, then we use the article the. It doesn't matter if it's the first time, second time, third time. It all depends on, do I think you know which one I am talking about? And then that is the situation when we should use the. Which again, I know this is maybe not, from what you learned at school, it's maybe a little bit strange, but this is how it works as a basic idea. When we have a singular, countable, new information, we use a or an. And when this information is shared, when it's known, we use the article the. The other one that we have in general is no article. I will go into more detail about each of these in just a minute, but the other one that we have in general is no article. And we use this to talk about plural or uncountable nouns in general. So there is nothing specific. You're not referring to it, something that's shared. It's just very general information. So again, if we have our cats as our example, you can say, for example, I like cats. All cats, any cats, doesn't matter which ones. I like all of them. And so we use no article in this situation. So they are the general rules, but there are a couple of extra typical uses of articles. So if we go back to at and an, a couple of extra things that we often use this for. First of all, about jobs. As I'm sure you know, with most jobs we use at or an. So for example, we could say, I don't know, she is a doctor. We often use it with nationalities, is very typical. We can say he is a German. And it's also often commonly used with religious beliefs. For example, we can say she is a Muslim. So with these things, it is very, very typical to use the article a. So with jobs, nationalities, and religious beliefs. The article the has a lot of uses. There are many, many uses for the article the. And the is probably the most difficult one to get right. So we use the with some countries, and we use them with plural countries. So якщо назву у множині, то, наприклад, ми можемо сказати the Netherlands, the United States, the Seychelles, the Philippines, all množina, all plural. So we use the. And we also use the if there is a political word in the name of the country. So for example, we say the Czech Republic. We say the United Kingdom. We say the, I'm not going to say the name of the country, federation. Sorry, that should be below. Just put that down. The federation. In all of these, we have a political word: republic, kingdom, federation. And so we use the article the with these as well. There is one exception to this rule, which is the country of the Vatican. Ultimate Jupiter, thank you for the follow. Дуже радий, що ви з нами. So we say the Vatican. This is the one виняток, exception to the rule with countries. Okay, so let's get rid of that. A few other things with the. We also use the with a lot of geographical things. So if we have mountain ranges, so groups of mountains, na przykład the Carpathians, the Andes, the Alps, we use the article there. Also with seas, so for example, the Black Sea, the Azov Sea, the Sea of Azov, we use the article there. With rivers, so for example, the Thames. London is the capital of Great Britain and it is situated on the Thames. I know the Ouse, річка в Великобританії, місті York. And also with oceans as well. So we say, for example, like the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. So we also use the article the with oceans as well. All of these geographical things. For geographical things, about the only exception is lakes and individual mountains. We do not use an article. So, for example, we can say Lake Svitis. Ja pamiętam, jak się pisze w angielskiej mowie. No article, or Hoverla, no article. So if we have a lake or one mountain, we do not use an article. But for nearly everything else, geographic, we use the article the. A few other points to add. We also use the with musical instruments. So for example, she plays the violin. We use it with superlative adjectives. So he is the fastest man in the world. The fastest, superlatives. We also use it with newspapers. Is also very typical as well. So we say, for example, like The Guardian, The Times, The Independent. And one other thing is we also use the with dates, but only when spoken. So, for example, if we have a date like, actually, let's use today's date, which is 12 listopada. So we write 12th November, but we would say the 12th of November. So we use the article the with dates, but only when we speak. When it's written, we don't normally do it. Then no article, a few nuances here. With no article, there are a couple of things to remember. So with no article, we use no article with what we call proper names. So for example, like Daniel, Mr. Jones, I don't know, Pavlo. I am not the Daniel, na przykład, I'm Daniel. And with proper names, we do not use an article with these. As we said before, with mountains, lakes, and most countries do not use an article. We already talked about this, but like most countries, Ukraine, France, Germany, Spain, Brazil, Canada, Poland, most countries do not use an article when we talk about them. We also don't normally use articles with materials. So like, for example, cotton, silk, Suede це замша, якщо ви не знаєте, то ми можемо сказати, наприклад, this jacket is made of silk. So no article usually. And one other thing, there are quite a few others, but one other thing I want to point out with no article, because this is a very typical mistake from Ukrainian speakers, is we don't normally use an article with meals. So breakfast, lunch and dinner. Як зазвичай article не треба. То ми можемо сказати, наприклад, I had breakfast this morning at 8 a.m. Ми не кажемо I had a breakfast this morning at 8 a.m. The only time it is correct to use an article with breakfast, lunch, dinner is when we have an adjective before it. So article plus adjective plus, наприклад, breakfast. So ми можемо сказати, for example, I had a big breakfast this morning. Правильно. Because now we have the adjective big. But if we have no adjective, then we do not use an article in this situation. Okay, so that's all of the main things about articles. Does anyone have any questions about articles? Czy was є запитання щодо articles? Коли кажуть the Ukraine, це не визнання України як країни, або ж якоїсь географічної області. Yeah, the Ukraine is an interesting one because this comes from history. During the Soviet occupation of Ukraine, we did not recognize Ukraine as an independent country. It was recognized as part of the Soviet Union. And because of this, Ukraine was understood like as a region, as an area. And because of this, it was very typical to put the article the before it. So we saw Ukraine not as a country at that time. Now, we said the Ukraine for a very, very long period of time, until 1991, until the liberation of Ukraine and the end of the Soviet Union. Until that time, we always said Ukraine. And for some people, I think it's very difficult to forget that this is not correct, that we should say Ukraine, because of course, Ukraine is now it's a незалежна країна. And I mean, it's been 30 years. I mean, it's been a long time since Ukraine has had its independence. But some people, unfortunately, just don't know or don't remember that we should say Ukraine with no article now. But it is for historical reasons. I mean, I think that я вважаю, що коли люди кажуть the Ukraine, це просто це просто звичка, так, можемо так сказати, це більше як звичка. Звісно, це неправильно, має бути Ukraine, без the, це безперечно, це так і має бути. Але я думаю, що просто іноді люди просто, не знаю, просто forget, що так і має бути. But, people are changing, it is getting better, people remember, people now write Kyiv, Odessa, and so on. Так, я бачив Netherlands із артиклем і без. Так, Netherlands має бути з артиклем, якщо за правилами, бо це країна, це множина, тому треба виживати the. Але треба тут також підкреслити, що people are lazy, скажімо так сказати. People do not always follow the rules of the language. So, якщо правильно, це має бути the Netherlands. But I am sure that you will see people write Netherlands as well, but якщо за правилом, це має бути the Netherlands, бо це множини. Тому так і має бути. Okay, so let's go on then. So a short question that I had next was about 3 words. Sorry, one more. Начальник заступник типу Duolingo, де часто перекладають, як це, чи це правильно? Ні, це не the. Ні, це неправильно. Це, я сказав би, це більше як this. Типу, ну, наприклад, цей стілець, this chair. Як зазвичай це не перекладається як the, бо ну, в українській мові взагалі мені здається, що в артиклі немає, це просто a and the ну, не виживають в українській мові. Але цей, ну, це ця, да, я перекладав би як this. Здається, це було б найкращий варіант, бо це не the, бо, ну, це хлопець, this boy. The, як це мені не подобається. Я думаю, що це неправильно. Окей. Okay, so next question, następne zapytanie that I had was about 3 words and about the etymology. The question was, why do we say wine? So wine, no, typu jak wino. But we say vineyard, vineyard's winogradnik. But also we say, якщо ми хочемо сказати виноград, ми кажемо grape. So why is this? Why do we have this reason, this difference? And the reason is because of history, is the short answer. English is a mix of many, many, many different languages. We have a very strong influence from French, of course, and by extension from Latin and the Romance languages, but also we have a strong influence from the Germanic languages, so also from Old German, from Old Norse, from Proto-Indo-European as well, which is the founding of nearly all of the modern languages that we have in Europe, and also some in Asia as well. And the short answer is because these words come from different places. So if we look at the word wine, first of all, wine and vine, these are examples of what we call a doublet. Now, a doublet is 2 words which have the same etymology, but they come to the language in a different way, not in the same way. And wine and vine is a very good example of this. So the word wine, if we take this as our first example, this comes from the Old English word wine, with no E on the end. And this is from Old English. And this means the word wine. This is what it means. The word vine, this comes to English from the Latin word, vinum. And this word also means wine. Now, if you go back far enough, the word win comes from a pronunciation change from the word vin, and which also comes from vinum, from the Latin word for wine originally. So both of these words come from vinum, from Latin, but because of the pronunciation change that happened in Old English, we have this difference that takes place here. The word grape is very interesting from etymology, from an etymological perspective. So the word grape appeared in English about 1250 to 1300. This word first appeared in English. And its etymology is a little bit unsure. We're not 100% where this word comes from. We think maybe it comes from the French word grappe, which was a type of hook that was used in this time for collecting fruit, but we are not 100% sure where this word comes from. So it's quite an interesting thing that even normal words, everyday words like grape, we don't know for sure where these words come from. But this is a very good example of how we can have words from many which are very closely connected to each other, but have completely different etymologies and come to the language from a different place. So just a short question about where these came from, and this is the answer that we have. Okay, so a couple more things then to look at. The next question that I had was about the subjunctive use in English. Now, before we start this, I should say that the subjunctive is very difficult. Native speakers often don't use this because it is very formal. It's very unusual to hear this in spoken English, in normal English, but some people do use it. And in written English as well, this is also a very typical construction that we have. So, first of all, what actually is the subjunctive? So the subjunctive is a special form of the verb that we use to show that something is necessary or something is important. And we often use this after certain verbs, verbs like recommend, insist, suggest, even adjectives like vital, critical, words like this. So if we have a look at a sentence, like for example, with insist. If we have a look at this sentence, I insist that he pay. Now, for those of you who look at this sentence, you will hopefully see that something is a little bit strange, a little bit unusual in this sentence. And what is unusual? The fact that there is no S on the end of the word pay. We should normally say pays. I pay, you pay, he pays. I'm sure you all know this. So there is no S on the end of this word. And why not? Because this follows insist that. And after the phrase insist that, we use the subjunctive. And the subjunctive is just the infinitive of the verb. Let's take some more water. So we use the infinitive after these constructions. Now, if you have it with anything else other than he, she, it, you cannot tell that it's the subjunctive. For example, I insist that you pay. This just looks normal, nothing special, just like a normal sentence. But grammatically, this is the subjunctive, and it looks exactly the same as the infinitive. The only way that we can see this, that it is actually the subjunctive, is when we have he, she, it, or with the verb be, because obviously be is very irregular. So we can have sentences like, I recommend that he be quiet. Looks very strange, looks very unusual, but grammatically it is correct. And there are certain verbs that we use. I'll just maybe make a quick list of these because it's probably going to be useful if you review this video later. It will be on YouTube, of the verbs that we commonly use this with. So they are the verbs advise, ask, demand, insist, propose, recommend, suggest, and request. If you have these verbs plus that and then a new clause, we then have subject plus infinitive. It's also typical after certain adjectives, which are advisable, anxious, desirable, eager, essential, important, necessary, preferable, vital, and willing. So just as an example, it is vital that he go home now. Something like this would work. So I just want to repeat again that this construction, using these verbs that and then new clause, using the subjunctive, it's very, very formal. In normal everyday spoken English, a lot of people will not use this construction, but it's what is, if you want to be sort of very precise and exactly correct as it should be, then this is how we should be using it. It's very formal. It's very literary even in our language, but this is how it can be. There are a couple of fixed phrases where we also use the subjunctive, which you can just remember these as fixed. We'll list these through and then we will finish up. So a couple of typical ones are so be it, This is a very typical expression. So this means the same as then let it happen. But so be it is a good example of the subjunctive. Bless you. When we want to say like "buzdrov," we say "bless you" in English, which is also a form of the subjunctive. Um, Long live the king. Another example using live, not lives, the infinitive. Be that as it may is also one, which this means whether it is true or not. And one more very typical expression is the phrase if need be, which means if it is necessary. So just a couple of examples with these. So like be that as it may. So for example, let me just put this down here. Just get rid of the first few because they're kind of just stand by themselves. Something like this. We're going to lose. Be that as it may, we're not going to give up. So like even if it is true that we're going to lose, we're not going to give up. And for example, if need be, we can say like, I'll take it to the Supreme Court if need be. So if it is necessary, I will take the matter, the idea, to the Supreme Court. Okay, so as I said, just to repeat one more time, the subjunctive is extremely formal. Please don't use this like in normal, everyday conversation because you'll sound a little bit old-fashioned. But for written English and for more formal dialogues, this is very typical, very usual, so you can use it in this situation. Okay, so in principle, that's everything I wanted to say today. Does anyone have any questions before we finish? Czy wasze budżety jakieś zapytania? A коли українці вживають формальні форми виразу англійської розуміють, що це через освіту, а не бажання бути формальним. Я думаю, що так. Yeah, I think we understand this. I think, of course, it depends on the person because if you have a person who has, you know, A2 English and then they are using phrases like if need be, it's a little bit suspicious. But if someone has a good knowledge of the English language and can communicate, then yes, of course. I think most people will understand that it's because of your education and not because you are, yeah, so nebężanie buty pomogą. That's dobre, yeah, it's true. A może, будь ласка, да, запитайте. Є фрази mission accomplished, game over, access denied. Чому такі фрази виживають без is? The short answer is because in fixed phrases like these, when they are used so often, we often just remove the parts that we don't need to understand the sentence, and especially with things like this, which are usually in written English, often we try and save space, like in video games, for example. If you say like the game is over, it sounds a little bit like, I don't know, it doesn't sound completely appropriate to the genre. I think we would just prefer, when we have these fixed phrases, we just try and make them as short as we can, just because people hear them again and again and again and again, and so they're just abbreviated. Because if you say game over, this is still completely understandable. You don't need to say the game is over because it's understandable to the person who you're talking to. Because also for all of these, tak, wyżywał bez is, a також wyżywał bez article. Bo тут має бути the mission is accomplished or has been accomplished. The game is over. Access is denied, but bez article взагалі. But mission and game normally use an article. And so here I think it's more just because we are trying to maybe save space, or because these phrases are so typical and so commonly used that we just avoid them just because it makes life easier, makes them shorter. So yeah. No, nема za що. Okay, does anyone have any other questions? No? Okay, all right. So I think we can finish there. So зараз українською. То дуже вам дякую, що ви були з мною сьогодні. Я сподіваюся, що це було корисним для вас. Бажаю вам гарного дня, бережіть себе і слава Україні! До побачення, до наступного разу.